presentation, and Megan, thank you for the flexibility. As you can see from the date on my slide, I had planned on doing this on the 18th, but I was unable, so I really appreciate being rescheduled. So today we're going to talk about spreading happiness through positive leadership. I want to start by saying that I am not a happiness expert. I actually don't always consider myself to be a very happy person. If you asked my husband, he'd probably tell you that I have kind of a doomsday mindset. Everything's my fault. I did everything wrong. But that's actually what drew me to this topic of happiness and positive leadership. I was really curious as to why some people tended to be more happy or more optimistic than others. And I wanted to know if that was a learned behavior or if that was something that they were just born with, and if there was a way to kind of turn around my negative self-talk and my negative thoughts and feelings and become more happy myself. So basically, I have spent the last year to year and a half kind of reading and exploring this topic of happiness, and it led me to positive psychology and positive leadership and a lot of brain research. And it's kind of changed the way that I've done things as an administrator in a CTE center. So today my plan is to kind of share some of that background with you on happiness and positive leadership, and then the practical strategies that I'm using myself and with some of my colleagues and staff to build happiness and build positive leadership throughout our building. Sorry. All right, so what we're going to cover today is some background knowledge, like I said, as it relates to the definition of happiness, how our brains actually function in regards to negativity and happiness, and then the effects of happiness on the workplace. Then we will look at some ways that we can create happiness. Typically, I've done this as a face-to-face presentation, so we've practiced some of these happiness habits and strategies. So I'll do my best to describe them so that you can, do them on your own time or use them with colleagues or staff. We'll talk about how happiness and happiness habits lead into positive leadership, and then I'll give examples of what we've done at my center and all of the resources that I've used. So in terms of defining happiness, if you look at all of the different definitions on the screen, you'll see that there's a variety of ways to define happiness. Aristotle started with human flourishing. Martin Seligman talks about pleasure, engagement, and meaning. Shawn Achor says it's the joy we feel striving after our potential. And Sonia, I'm going to butcher her last name, so I'm going to skip it, kind of expands on Shawn Achor's definition and talks about it being the experience of joy, contentment, or positive well-being, combined with a sense that one's life is good, meaningful, or worthwhile. So one of my first aha moments in this journey on trying to find happiness was these definitions. I always thought happiness was more of a feeling, and these definitions really led it to me understanding that it's a lot more about finding meaning and striving towards your potential and just the joy you feel about living your life. At first, I really misunderstood happiness and thought, Shawn Achor calls it irrational optimism, and that's kind of what I thought happiness was. Like I said, I thought it was a feeling. I thought it was always looking at, like, you always have to look at the bright side. You always have to try to be happy, and that's not the case at all. It's less about that irrational optimism and ignoring the negatives and more about making a conscious effort to find joy, to be mindful about happy moments, and to process and let go of negative things quickly and move on. So like I said before, I'm not a happiness expert or researcher. A lot of the information, especially right now, that I'm going to tell you about comes from Shawn Achor, who works in positive psychology, and Rick Hansen, who works in neuroplasticity and just the impact of happiness on the brain. The first thing that I learned by reading some of this brain research is that how we process negativity and how we process happiness really has a lot to do with the way that our brain was formed and the way that our brain is programmed. Even though we are very complex human beings, we still have a lot of survival instincts and primitive instincts in our brain. And because of that, our brain tends to have a negativity bias. So our brain's actually more likely to scan the world for negative events, potential threats, than it is to focus on the positive. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, because in the past, when we didn't have the resources that we have now, you know, we had to, survival was our number one thing. We have to stay alive. And if you misinterpreted something and you didn't feel, you know, think it might be a threat and you didn't focus on the negative, then you might not be alive later. So it was really a way of keeping us alive and safe and allowing us to continue. So our brains tend to overestimate threats because that keeps us alive and underestimate the opportunities and the positive things that we see in our world. An example of this is in our implicit memory, where we learn faster from pain than pleasure. So if you think about if you've ever accidentally touched a hot pan, your brain processes that way faster than a positive emotion, and it knows that that pain is something that it doesn't want to experience again, and it teaches you not to touch a hot pan. If you're like me, then you probably don't have a lot of time for yourself. So when I do have time for myself and I actually read a book that I like or take a yoga class or go for a hike, I always find myself thinking like, wow, you know, I really enjoyed that. I can't believe I don't remember like how good that feels, or I don't do that more, or how much I liked it. And the brain research that Shawn and Rick kind of shared shows that since we learn faster from pain than pleasure, a lot of times it takes more pleasurable experiences to get that stored into our memory. So when I first heard that, I was like, wow, it's a little bit depressing. It's kind of like what I originally thought, that my brain is just programmed to be more negative than other people's. But Rick Hansen, with all of his research on neuroplasticity, actually says it's the opposite. He truly believes that experience changes the brain. And when you think about all of the brain research out there, that's really what we see. Is you can practice makes perfect. You can learn new skills. You can retrain your brain to do new things after an injury, and the same thing happens when it comes to happiness. The way to create more happiness is to focus on happiness more and to consciously look for those opportunities to be happy and relish those experiences and build on those experiences. And the more you do that, the more likely your brain is to scan the world for positive experiences and remember those positive experiences and let the negative experiences go more quickly. So a lot of the research on the effects of happiness come from Shawn Achor, and he pulls from a lot of other positive psychologists. So the quote at the top of the screen talks about how happy workers have higher levels of productivity, they perform better, happy CEOs are more likely to lead teams of people who are happy, who are productive, who enjoy their work and have higher work performance. And he's done studies across the world through a variety of companies, both small companies and Fortune 500 companies. And what he tends to see is that the more happy and satisfied staff are with their jobs, they have higher levels of creativity, they have higher productivity, their sales increase, their potential for promotion increases, happiness affects their all-around work rate. And in his book, The Happiness Advantage, he talks about the correlation between a strong social network in life in general, but most specifically at work, and your likelihood to be successful and happy at work. And he puts that correlation as a 0.7. And my reaction when I first saw that was exactly what Shawn anticipates and writes in his book. And I'm like, well, that's not very big. And then Shawn later goes on to explain that that correlation is actually greater than a lot of the statistics between the correlation between lung cancer and smoking. And I know a lot of people would agree that lung cancer leads, or smoking leads to lung cancer. So I feel like that kind of gives merit to this idea that a strong social network leads to happiness and success. So after hearing all of this, it just kind of motivated me more. I'm like, wow, you know, happiness is kind of the key to success. It's the key to performance at work. It's going to make all aspects of my life better, but I still didn't know how to build happiness within myself and within like my life. So Shawn Achor came to the rescue again, and he had a lot of suggestions for creating happiness habits. And if you remember the information about the brain research, the more we practice something, the more it becomes just something that we do. And it makes everything else more likely to happen. So Shawn gives a bunch of simple suggestions for how to create happiness habits and build the potential for happiness in your life. So the first one, self-care, I always feel is deceptively simple. I think everybody knows we should sleep a lot, enough, we should eat well, we should exercise, but that always seems to be the first thing to go when I get busy. I stay up later, I go into work earlier, my eating suffers, I skip the gym so I can check a few more emails. But a lot of Shawn's research said that it truly impacts your potential at happiness. And a lot of the happiness and positive psychology researchers say that, people look at self-care as something selfish. We should be giving of our others, and we should be taking care of our family and our spouses and our job. But all of the research suggests that if we don't take care of ourselves first, we won't be able to do a good enough job taking care of other people. And an example that Shawn says from one of his studies is that he had study participants try to memorize negative words and positive words, and he would have them repeat them back after decreasing the amount of sleep that they had. And what he found was that the less sleep participants had, the fewer positive words they could remember, but the number of negative words didn't really change. So again, going back to that brain research, when we're tired, when we're dysregulated, we're more likely to be scanning the world for negatives because our brain is on high alert and it's trying to keep us safe. So if we want to set ourselves up for happiness and for success, we really have to try to eat well, to sleep, and to exercise. So there's a lot of research, again, out there about gratitude and journaling. Shawn Achor suggests having a journal and doing daily gratitudes, which are specific and different every day. He also talks about noise canceling or meditation. So everybody, I feel like, kind of has an idea of what meditation is, either sitting quietly and focusing on your breathing, or doing a guided meditation that helps you relax, or chanting a mantra that you want to embed into your life. Noise canceling was an interesting concept where it was just finding quiet time. So even if it's on your way to work, turning off the radio, or if you're used to reading the newspaper in the morning with your cup of coffee, just having your cup of coffee. A lot of Shawn Achor's research found that 3 minutes of negative news in the morning can impact your day by making it way more likely that you're focusing on negative events and outcomes throughout your day. So he encourages people to not hide their head in the sand and ignore everything that's happening in the world, but to be very conscious of when they choose to listen to the news or check social media, and what posts and pieces of news information they're really going to focus on, because there's so much in the world that we can't control, and that feeling of not being in control tends to make us more negative. So when we're picking and choosing what we're going to listen to, what we're going to learn about, really having it be something that we feel is important to us, or that we can have an impact in, or become better people from learning about it. The 10-5 rule I thought was really interesting. This was something that Shawn did in a hospital. They were having really poor results in terms of patient satisfaction and customer service, and he was working with the hospital staff to turn it around. So his suggestion was, whenever somebody comes within 10 feet of you, you smile and you make eye contact. And if they come within 5 feet of you, you extend that to greeting them. And the reasoning behind that is when you smile, it gives you a little personal burst of happiness. And a lot of times when you smile at somebody, they automatically mirror back to you that smile. So hopefully you're giving them a little bit of happiness in return. And what he found at the end of his work with that hospital was that not only did the customer satisfaction and patient satisfaction results improve, everyone in that hospital felt better and had greater morale. And then another strategy that Shawn Achor suggests is called a power lead. And a power lead just allows you to kind of take control of a potentially negative situation. So if you're anticipating a difficult day, you're anticipating a difficult conversation or a meeting, kind of prepare a statement that you're going to start the meeting out with that is positive. So in our center, we tend to use like, it's a great time to be in CTE, or it's a great day to be part of CTE. So if I'm going into a meeting with a team that I think is going to be difficult or challenging in whatever way, I might, right before I officially start the meeting, just say, hey, everybody, it's a great day to be in CTE today. In this meeting, we're going to talk about whatever and go into the agenda, and hope that, starting with that positive kind of gets people to shift their mindset a little bit. And if that doesn't happen, it at least got me to focus on something positive before I went into the meeting, and it might impact the way that my body language is or the way that I handle resistance or defensiveness throughout that meeting. Martin Seligman is another person. I had one of his quotes on that first slide, defining happiness, who did a lot of research on learned helplessness, optimism, and resiliency. And what he found was that people tend to have two explanatory narratives that they use to kind of shape their worldview and to explain situations and things that happen to them. He summarizes it with the 3 Ps: personalization, permanence, and pervasiveness. So if you tend to be a more pessimistic person, or kind of like how I described myself in the beginning, you have a tendency to see negative events and mistakes as like all bad, and you feel like, you know, everything I do in my life is wrong, or everything is my fault, things are never going to get any better, and you kind of have that all or nothing attitude with a negative shift on it, then that really leads to kind of that learned helplessness or learned hopelessness, where things feel so overwhelming, and if everything is bad and nothing's ever going to get better, why should I try to fix it? So he encourages everyone to kind of, again, shift their thinking when it comes to those things, and instead of personalizing whatever negative situation happened, really I'm trying to understand that none of us are in control of everything. Everything that happens to us, or every decision we make, still has some outside influence, some outside factors that are contributing to the success or the failure or the positive or negative impact of that decision or event. So you really have to try to keep that in perspective and avoid the self-blame. And then the other thing is to think of setbacks as temporary. Nothing's ever going to last forever. There's always a way to problem solve, to come back from something. And that, in terms of pervasiveness, everything is situational. So a bad day at work doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad day at home, or that your whole life is wrong or falling apart. It's just one part of your day, one part of your life, and you can always overcome that. So this kind of thinking, you know, that challenges stress and failure to become more of a challenge to help you overcome it, it not only leads to resiliency, but again, it helps you to focus on the positive things in your life and to let go of those negative things more quickly. A couple other strategies that I've shared with my staff. One comes from Rick Hansen, and the acronym is Keel. So he recommends this technique while you're having a positive experience to develop that experience more deeply, and then to help you overcome negative experiences. So when you're having a positive experience, you're really just supposed to recognize that you're having that experience, acknowledge it, and enrich it by focusing on all of the details of that experience. You know, what's happening around you? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? How do you feel being part of that experience? And then the absorbing it is not to just let it pass. So quickly good things happen to us and we're in a hurry that we don't take the time to really absorb them and notice them. So he encourages you to sit with it for at least 20 seconds and just try to enjoy it, do some breathing, deep breathing or calm breathing, so that, again, it gets linked to your memory quicker and has a stronger impact on what your brain is storing. And then when you're faced with a negative situation, he wants you to link it back to that positive experience that you've just, enriched and absorbed, because it will help transition those negative feelings into either neutral or more positive experiences and help you move on from it. Shawn Achor recommends something similar in an activity that he calls the doubler, because it's supposed to double the impact of a positive experience. So earlier I said that journaling and daily gratitudes can be really helpful. I personally didn't find the daily gratitudes helpful when I was practicing them. I got pretty frustrated by them, but the doubler was something that really worked for me. When you're doing the doubler, it's a specific journaling exercise where you're supposed to think of something positive that happened to you in the past 24 hours, and you write about it nonstop for 2 minutes. And in that 2 minutes, you're really supposed to think about everything sensory. So, maybe you were sitting outside. By us, we finally have nice weather. So maybe you're sitting outside on your porch in the sun last night after work. So you think about, what can you hear? What can you see? How did that chair feel? How did you feel? Could you feel the sunlight on you? Was there a light breeze? and you would write about all of these things. And similar to the other things we've talked about, this helps just kind of, imprint it into your mind, but it also helps you relive that positive experience because you're focusing so much on all the sensory pieces of it. And when I did that, when I started my day with it, I automatically felt better because I was kind of reliving that experience. And then the more that I did this, the more throughout my day, I'd find my mind kind of wandering back to whatever I wrote about. And that would immediately bring me either a sense of calm or a sense of joy, depending on what experience I chose to write about. So this is a sign that I love. It says, happiness is contagious, be a carrier. Shawn Achor is a firm believer that emotions and attitudes are contagious. In a lot of his studies, he's done things with body language and facial expressions to show how it can spread through a room. There's like a study that he did in elevators where one person will come in and just like cross their arms and put a grumpy look on their face, and slowly you can see everybody kind of react to that and start to mimic that posture, that body language, that facial expression. The same thing if somebody does something happy. One of the activities that we do with my staff is a mirror experiment where we partner people up, and one person will smile and make eye contact and the other person just stays neutral for as long as they can. And what you find is that it's really hard to resist somebody looking you in the eyes and smiling, and eventually you want to smile back. So that kind of, shows that happiness is contagious, and we use that example with our staff to illustrate how important it is to greet our students in the morning with a smile, with eye contact, with a hello. And I think it goes back to Shawn's work with that hospital where he used the 10-5 rule to change the culture and to make patients and customers feel a lot more satisfied and connected to the hospital and the services that they were getting. So one of Shawn's things that he loves to say is that happiness is contagious and that we should spread happiness wherever we go, and that we should be conscious about it, which is a great segue into positive leadership, because positive leadership is all about those practices that can spread positivity within your organization. So if you look at that first quote on what is positive leadership, it talks about the multiple positive practices that help individuals and organizations achieve their highest potential, flourish at work, experience elevating energy, and reach levels of effectiveness. So it sounds very much like some of those definitions that we had of happiness. It's about human flourishing. It's about finding meaning and joy in the work that you do. And it's all about those practices that leaders intentionally put into place in order to cause their organizations more likely to be positive and then more likely to have these results. And I started with those happiness habits first because as a leader, your behavior matters, and the way that you feel and the way that you show those emotions to your staff and you handle a bad day are going to have an impact on the people around you. So even though sometimes it feels selfish to practice those self-care and those happiness habits, it's really important to do so that you're in the right place to lead by example, to model, and to help your staff grow and develop those same habits. So in addition to the happiness habits that we've just discussed, some of the specific ways that you can practice positive leadership are through high quality connections. So Jane Dutton and Gretchen Spreiter edited a book called How to Be a Positive Leader, and they build on this idea of positive leadership practices and social connection through the idea of high quality connections. And the first thing that they say impacts high quality connections is having supportive communication. So again, I feel like this is one of those things that are deceptively simple. As leaders, of course, we want to be supportive and effective in our communication, but how often do we truly reflect on our communication style and intentionally communicate with other people? I'm ashamed oftentimes at the amount of times a staff person comes to talk to me, and it takes me a while to turn away from my computer screen or to put down whatever I was doing, or I'm in a meeting and it's an important meeting and people are sharing, but I'm thinking about the 20 other things that I need to get done that day and not truly focusing on the people around me. So I really kind of took the supportive communication to heart, because I could see where no matter how much I think I'm good at communication, when I get busy, it's one of the first things that tends to lack. So it's all about that effective listening, the eye contact, the making sure that you're not distracted and you're truly listening to people, practicing empathy, paraphrasing back so that you know that you're listening to someone, and putting away the technology. A lot of times in the meetings that I lead, there's somebody taking minutes for me on the computer, and other people might have their computers out because they're looking up things that we're talking about, and it's all related to what we're doing, but it does impact your ability to listen. So I was in another training where the presenter talked about full face listening, and he described it as when you have a young child and you're not paying attention to them, a lot of times they'll grab your face and force you to look at them when they're trying to tell you something important. So now I talk to my staff about, like, okay, close up your computers, it's time for full face listening. We're all going to look at each other and we're going to talk about the subject, and then if we need resources after a few minutes, we can go back to our computers and look at it. Another thing that I've noticed in my work, which is part of the high quality connections, is that idea of building trust. And I think everybody knows that trusting relationships are important, you know, between students and teachers, amongst teachers, between administrators and teachers, and just with, you know, any important relationship in your life. But I don't know that there's a lot of like concrete guidance as to how do you create these positive and trusting relationships. So the one that they talk about is really having your actions match your words. And if you say you're going to do something, to actually do it. And if you say you believe in something, to have all of your actions connect with what you believe in, so that people start to build that trust with you. And I think this leads to one of the norms that I'm trying to use in our meetings, which is presuming positive intentions. And what I've noticed is because there's a lack of trust in some cases amongst staff or between administration and teachers, they're unable to presume those positive intentions. And they're thinking that, you know, because I got busy and I forgot to follow up with them, it was intentional. So now I'm trying to go back and make a conscious effort to, you know, flag my emails that need immediate follow up with people right away, let them know, sorry, I'm busy, but I'm going to get back to you. And just trying to make my words and my actions and my values all match so that I can build that trust. One of the most important things, I think, is that having fun. Bullet and I love the two sayings, you know, bond over joy, not junk, blessings, not burdens. When something is wrong, I can find a person like within minutes to talk to complain to problem solve with, to try to get it done. But I can go days without talking to that same person just to check in and say, like, how was your weekend? What did you do? What's going on with your family? So this one really reminds me that, you know, there's that saying that misery loves company, but nobody really wants to be miserable. People want to be happy. They want to feel connected. So instead of sharing the burdens and venting and complaining about things, really find moments to connect over positive activities, positive things that are happening in each other's lives. And then the enabling others to perform, I think, is an important part of leadership, and it links to this next strategy, which is exercising a signature strength. So Rick Hansen has done research that states that a third of our inner strengths or character traits, whatever you want to call them, are innate. So that means there's a lot of development that we can do if we're not immediately good at something. So one of the resources for doing this is the VIA Institute, and they have a character assessment that the website does. So they ask you a variety of questions, and then based on your responses, they will order your 24 character traits from greatest ability to those that need further development. And I was like really impressed with how accurate this was. Some of the traits that were my highest were love of learning, creativity, perseverance, team building, leadership, all things that if you asked me what I was good at, I would probably say, I think those are things that I'm good at. And then the site goes on to talk about, and so does Rick Hansen's work, that the more you get to use these inner strengths or these inner traits that you have, the more satisfied you tend to feel, the more meaning you have because it's connecting to something that's deeply ingrained and meaningful to you. So the more likely you are to find happiness. And as I reflected on that, I realized that that's really true. Like when I get to be creative, when I get to learn something new, like all of this stuff on happiness, and start to figure out how to apply it into my life and into my work, that's when I really feel like I'm pumped about it. You know, I'm energized, I'm excited, I'm happy with the work I'm doing, I find meaning in it. And so now that I know these things about myself, or at least I have validation for these things that I thought I knew about myself, I actively look for tasks that align to these traits. One of the things that I thought was interesting was that one of the traits that was like really far at the end, like number 23 or 24, was gratitude. And when I read that, I was like, wow, well, that makes sense that those daily gratitudes were a real struggle for me and ended up being frustrating. But the good news is that the site offers a variety of resources and activities to help you develop these traits. It could be a mantra, it could be a book to read, it could be, you know, videos of examples of those traits and actions, all different kinds of things that you can do to build the character traits that maybe you aren't as strong with. So what we've done with this information is my fellow administrators all took the survey as well so that we could kind of compare and contrast where our traits were. And we divide up, every year we divide up our job responsibilities, and one of our assistant principals takes lead on student management. And if you're familiar with CTE in New York State, there is a state approval process for all of our programs. So another administrator takes lead on that. I tend to take lead on professional development and teacher evaluation because it links so closely to professional development. So we're really seeing if our strengths match up with some of the tasks that we have. And if it's a task that doesn't, like, is there somebody else who would find more meaning in doing that task? I've encouraged my instructional specialists to take the same assessment so that when we're looking for who's going to take lead on different projects, we can try to match it to their strengths, and then that we can all be aware of each other's areas of growth and find opportunities to try to build those amongst ourselves. Another strategy is responding with meaning. So again, if you think back to those definitions of happiness and the definitions of positive leadership that I shared, so much of it has to do with finding joy and meaning in what we do. So one of the ways to practice positive leadership is to find the meaning behind the work that we're doing and to share that meaning with our staff and our colleagues and to help them find the meaning behind what they're doing every day. So for example, when you listen to my bio that Megan read for me, it was very much task-oriented. You know, you found out my title and my organization, you knew some of my responsibilities. I think I talked about, you know, that I do professional development, support for students with disabilities, teacher evaluation, things like that. And that's typically when I'm asked, you know, what do you do for a living, or where do you work? What's your job in CTE? Those are all the things that most people probably respond to, a title and some of the responsibilities to give somebody outside of education an understanding of what that title means. So when I was doing this happiness research, it really talked about getting away from those job responsibilities and those duties and talking about the meaning behind what you do. So if you ask yourself, you know, why do you want to work in CTE? One of the things that I might say to that is because I want students to know that they have options when they graduate from high school and to be able to make informed choices about what they're going to do next. If you asked why teacher evaluations and the connection between teacher evaluations and professional development is important to me, I might say that it's because teachers, you know, I want my teachers to be lifelong learners. I want them to continue to reflect and grow and refine their practice. So that's way different than how I had Megan introduce myself, you know, focusing on the tasks. So it really kind of challenges you when you're asked that question, what do you do for a living? What job do you have? To focus with the meaning behind it. So if I was to do that in the introduction, I might have had her say, you know, this is Paula Boughton, and she's had 7 years in administration where she works with CTE students to help them make informed choices about their options after high school, and she works with teachers to be lifelong learners and grow and reflect and refine their practice. And when you put it in that context, you know, your daily tasks that can get overwhelming or, you know, monotonous after a while take on a whole new meaning and a whole new importance. So I've been doing some activities with my teachers to really kind of have them figure out their why, or like their personal mission statement. You know, in CTE, people have come from industry, so they've given up industry positions to go back and teach. And a lot of people have never thought about being teachers before. So why did they do that? Why is teaching so meaningful? And a lot of our teachers are coming up with, you know, somebody else helped me and now it's my turn to give back. So when they're asked, you know, what do you do? And they say, oh, I'm just a teacher, or I'm a CTE teacher. And it's like, no, I'm, you know, participating in a profession where I get to give back to my industry every day. And that makes it sound so much better and makes you part of a bigger picture and brings meaning into the work that we do that I think we know is implicitly there, but sometimes it's important to be explicit about it so that when we're feeling down or having a bad day, we've got that connection to something bigger than us and positive. So this is a lot of information and a lot of strategies. And typically, if I was to hear something like this, or even when I was reading and researching all of this, my initial thought is like, I'm so busy. There's no way I can add something else to my day. You know, I'm tired in the morning. I can't even exercise. I'm lucky if I make my lunch, things like that. But all of the research says that, you know, committing to happiness habits and trying to spread happiness and be a more positive leader doesn't have to be a huge time commitment. Shawn Achor has research that says that these habits can be created in 21 days if they're done consistently. In one of his books, he quotes a study where he worked with a company to give explicit positive verbal praise to all of their employees every day for 21 days. And then he did assessments in terms of productivity and staff morale and job satisfaction before and after that 21-day period. And it was amazing how much things had increased by just the small act of intentionally being positive and giving positive feedback to employees. There's a lot of research both by Shawn Achor and Rick Hansen about how 2 minutes can help reset your brain. So if you're tired, if you've had a really busy day, if you've just come from a stressful meeting, all you need is 2 minutes. It could be to meditate, to sit quietly, to journal, to walk around the office, to get outside for a few minutes. There's tons of research about just the effect of a few minutes of sunlight on resetting the brain and making us more prone to see the positive in the world around us. Talking to a colleague is huge, especially since that supportive social network is such an indicator of success at work. And then sending a positive email or text. I actually kind of like to start my day with this. If any of you have jobs like mine, by the time I get to work, even if I have cleaned up all of my emails today, tomorrow morning or Monday morning, I'll have like 30 or 40 emails to go through. And that can be really overwhelming if I have a busy day. So before I even check the emails in my inbox, I'll try to think of somebody who's done something or somebody that I want to recognize and just send a quick, you know, good job, thanks for doing that email, because it puts me in a happier frame of mind and a more positive frame of mind as I'm trying to get through the task of going through all my emails. And then Shawn Achor also has done a lot of research on 20 seconds and how 20 seconds can make you more likely to succeed, or it can make it more likely for you to break a habit. And he illustrates this by making things 20 seconds easier, 20 seconds harder. So I am a total yo-yo dieter. I'm always thinking I can, you know, change my eating, get it back on track. I follow every fad diet. And the thing that has worked the best is this idea of making things 20 seconds easier and 20 seconds harder. So I keep all of the junk food for my kids, the soda, the ice cream, the chips, the cookies, you know, whatever snack food they like, in the laundry room refrigerator and cabinets downstairs. And in my kitchen, I have the bottled water. I have pre-portioned fruits and vegetables and cheese sticks and things that are a lot healthier. And I see it working with myself that on most days, it's a lot easier to go to the fridge in the kitchen than it is to walk down those stairs. It's not like I have 100 stairs in my house, but just that extra effort sometimes feels too much. And I see it with my boys especially, where they're like, oh, do we have any soda up here? And I'm like, no, it's downstairs. And they're like, okay, I'll have a water. or I'll have an apple, because it just feels harder to take those extra seconds to do something. I do the same thing in my bedroom because I found myself, my husband insisted on a TV in the bedroom, and then I find myself binge watching Netflix too much and sometimes staying up too late and not getting the sleep that I need. So I put the remote across the room in a drawer and close that drawer, and I have my book on the table next to my bed. And if I have a busy day and I've cooked dinner and I finally go upstairs and I flop down on that bed and then I'm like, oh, I don't have the remote to turn off the TV or turn on the TV, it's a lot more work to get up and get it than it is to just grab my book and read. So I find myself reading a lot more and not binge watching Netflix in the evenings after work. And I just think that's interesting that 20 seconds can trick your brain that way. So if you can think of ways to build in positive interactions and positive activities and just make them 20 seconds easier, you're going to be a lot more likely to do them. So I've already shared some of the things that we've been doing in our center, but I kind of want to talk about how we got on this happiness journey, and what we've been doing for ourselves. So I got introduced to Shawn Achor actually, and the idea that we're in control of our happiness through an instructional coaching PD that I went to. I had previously been trained as an instructional coach, and I just wanted to see if there's current information so I could better help my instructional specialists. And the presenter talked about Shawn Achor and the power of positivity and how it could be used in a coaching model. And I was really intrigued by all of this because on the one hand, I was like, wow, I can be in control of my own happiness. But on the other hand, it was like, wow, it's my own fault that I'm not more happy. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But I started doing research about happiness and sharing it with my administrative colleagues. So last summer when our staff left for summer break, we decided that we were going to intentionally try to develop our own happiness levels and have some self-care. So we read Shawn Achor's book, The Happiness Advantage, and he has an online course that goes along with the book. So every day he talks to you in a video, gives you some tips and a happiness strategy to practice. So we were all able to hold ourselves accountable. There's 4 administrators in my building. I'm one of them. So we were all able to hold ourselves accountable for doing the class, for reading the chapters in the book, for talking about it. From there, we started scheduling our lunch breaks as if they were meetings. So they're on our calendars. We invite each other. We say whose office we're going to eat in, if we're going to try to go for a walk, if we're going to eat in the staff lounge. This is my 7th year here, and I can tell you most years I probably didn't get a lunch break or I ate while I was doing work on my computer. Now, at least 3 times a week, we have 15, 20 minutes together. And the rule is that we cannot talk about work. And if we start to talk about work, somebody calls us out, and says, nope, sorry, can't talk about that yet. And we'll set a timer and we'll just talk about our lives and share positive things that are happening. One of the things that has really helped in doing this is, again, holding each other accountable and coming up with these happiness habits when we're having a difficult day, because it happens. We have stressful situations and we'll start to, talk to each other about it, and the conversation might start to get negative. And then one of us will be like, you know what, I think we have to take a minute and say something that we're grateful for. Or, you know what, yes, that happened, but today is a great day to be working in CTE. And it kind of changes our thought process. We had a capital project, so we were removed from our offices last year and last summer. So in the fall, when we moved back in, we all chose positive sayings to post in our office. So today I choose to be happy. It's one of Shawn Achor's big sayings. My assistant principal put that in her office. And then the inhale tacos, exhale negativity, my daughter picked out for me because she thought that felt more like my kind of vibe than a choose happiness saying. And I think one of the greatest things that we're doing for each other is just sending texts to each other in the evenings after a difficult day. So, yeah, that was hard, but I'm grateful for the way you handled it, or I'm glad that I can talk to you, or I'm glad I don't have to have all the answers and I can tap out of a situation because I know you got my back. And these were all, a lot of these things were things we had done before, but they were a lot more sporadic and they weren't intentional. And now we're really trying to take the time to take care of ourselves and to take care of each other. And it's definitely having an impact on our work and how we feel at the end of the day. We're not as exhausted, we're not as burnt out. And if we are, we know that the next day is going to be better, or that one of us can, take one for the team and help out. So when our staff came back, we decided we were going to try to purposely do things to spread the happiness to them and to be more positive leaders. So we started opening day with a lot of team building and getting to know you and community building activities. And again, those were things that we might have done once in a while, but we really decided that, you know, all of those standard things you do on an opening day, like reminding them about purchasing and start and end times, those are things that could happen in an email. Like, let's spend our time together checking in and getting to know each other and celebrating what we did over the summer. We've done, mostly me, but sometimes my other administrative colleagues help out, have done workshops on some of these happiness habits, or have used some of these happiness habits as an icebreaker for other workshops or meetings. We're really making an effort to capture positive things that are happening with our students, with our staff, and highlighting them through email updates and during our faculty meetings. If any parents or community members directly send us an email or leave us a message about something positive that they experienced, we've been sharing those with staff. Or if teachers have something positive feedback from, you know, an industry rep or a parent, and they're sharing it with us, we'll ask for a copy. We'll read it in one of our faculty meetings. We're all trying to either do the gratitudes or the doubler activity. So sometimes we share, if we've written something that's related to work, we'll share that in a faculty meeting or in a smaller group meeting to kind of model those happiness habits. And in November, the one assistant principal and myself got together and we created all of these little leaves that said, you know, I'm grateful for, and we laminated them and would write messages to the staff on them. And then on the back, there was a sticker that said, you know, happiness is contagious, pass it on, so they could rewrite those messages. So that worked out really well. And then for the first time this year, sorry, we had a sunshine squad. So all of our staff participated with monetary contributions, and our sunshine squad did monthly activities for the whole building. Again, these things happen sporadically in the past, but now we were really intentional about doing them for our holiday one. Every single staff person in our building, security, secretaries, teachers, they all participated. And then our sunshine squad took that idea of the little gratitude messages and started doing them themselves. So at Christmas, there were little cards that looked like presents that said, your presence is a present, and people would pass them along to staff. The You're Totally My Jam picture is what they did for Valentine's Day. So everybody got one of those in their mailboxes. And it's just kind of led to a culture where we're all intentionally trying to focus on the positive and spread positivity throughout our building. So these are all the resources that I kind of looked at in my happiness journey. All of the books are really good. One of the things that I really liked about them is that it's a little bit of science, like the brain research. It's a little bit of research and anecdotal information from studies, and it's a lot of practical tips and advice and things that are easy to overlook unless you're actually thinking about the impact that they could have. The websites that I listed, this TED Talk is Shawn Achor doing maybe 15, 20-minute TED Talk on happiness and how it's the secret to a better workforce, and that's actually the video that led me on kind of this happiness journey. Good Think Inc. is Shawn Achor's website. Rick Hansen has his own website. Happify.com is a really cool website where you can do different self-assessments on your levels of happiness and satisfaction, and there's all kinds of resources similar to the ones I shared about how to increase the likelihood of being happy. The Positive Psychology website has a ton of research and readings and resources. On Facebook, so one of the things that I've done to try to make my social media a little bit more positive was I follow the Daily Goalcast. So similar to TED Talks, they post very quick, inspirational videos, sometimes from children, sometimes from survivors of horrific things that are talking about resiliency and how you overcome things. So instead of looking at the political posts, I might search for one of those and watch that instead. And then if you're interested in just trying to slow down or meditate and you don't know how to do it, Calm is a free app that you can get for iPhone or Android. There is a paid version that goes a little bit more deeper, but it has quick daily meditations. It's got meditations to help you, like 7 days to help you sleep, 7 days to help you forgive. It's got really cool, just relaxing stories and songs and nature sounds, and it's actually something that I've been using for quite a while. So that is everything. Thank you so much for allowing me to kind of talk about my happiness journey and share what we've been doing in our center to try to become more happy, to become more positive. I really hope that one of these strategies speaks to you and that you're able to find something that you can incorporate into your own life or you can share with your colleagues and try to make, you know, everybody a little bit happier, a little bit more satisfied with your jobs. Overall, I don't know that I've found the secret to happiness, but I can tell you that I am definitely more conscious of the way that I can control my thoughts and feelings and the impact that it has on others. And I think, you know, if nothing else, it's never a bad thing in a leadership position to be more mindful and more reflective. And I'm not sure I would have focused on those skill development if I hadn't come across like the idea of happiness and having it have an impact on your job. So my email is listed if anybody has questions or wants to further the discussion or wants to know more about the resources, please reach out and email me. And thanks again for allowing me to share this. And as Shawn Achor likes to say, you know, I hope all of you choose happiness today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Paula. That was a really fun presentation. I really enjoyed it, especially for a Friday this summer. We will be posting the entire presentation on Monday, and then I'll email out to all educators in action the presentation link. So we will be sharing it. And then I just want to remind everybody again, July 18th, we will have another virtual discussion. And also to participate in the blog, if you have time, just send me your blog post. Other than that, I hope everybody is having an enjoyable summer, and I will be in touch on Monday with the presentation link. Thank you so much, Paula, for your time and the great presentation. Bye, everyone.